thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm not Kerry Upton, Chief Operations Officer. Kerry's sick today, so he's tested and said he doesn't have COVID, but he has a cold and didn't want to come and expose anyone. My name's Steve Massetti. I'm the Bond Program Manager. We're going to go through all of the planned work here at Rogers over the next several years. Luckily, we've got some very capable people who are going to be able to do that better than I could. So we'll start by going through the campus master plan. Jim Favreau from Johnson Favreau will walk us through that. And then we'll have Paul Travis from Historic Resources Group walk us through the historical resources. And then Nicole Greenfeld from Ascent will talk to us about CEQA and environmental. And so I was going to see if Principal DeRudy wanted to say anything, but she's not out here right now. So when she comes in, if she wants to add anything, of course we'll have her do that. Also, you can come closer. I don't think we're going to have many more people here tonight. So if you'd like to come closer, it's fine. If not, if you can hear us fine, then we can go from there.
With along the north of those two buildings, along the north boundary of campus, a new parking lot that joins 14th Street and 16th Street with a turnaround at the center of it to provide maximum flexibility for the school. We are moving the field to a more central location on campus, and next to that a new multi-purpose cafeteria building. And then there are some renovations to the historic core, the classroom complex here, which are to create outdoor learning classes and the interstitial spaces between the classroom wings, and to convert kindergarten into makerspace. So I'll go into more detail on each of those features of the plan in a minute. But we're beginning with what is, we believe, to be approved by the Board of Education to go into construction next June, in June of 2023, which we're calling Phase 1. Which is the early education building and moving the track. So this is the current condition, just to give everybody oriented. 16th Street on the top, 14th Street on the bottom, and green is the existing field. In purple are 6 portable classrooms. It is a goal of the Board of Education to get kids out of portable classrooms and into permanent classrooms, which is fulfilled in Phase 1, at least partially. So what will happen is we'll remove most of the field and all the asphalt in the playground area, and then also remove the 6 portable classrooms, 4 of them at 14th Street, 2 of them on the building site itself. The field will then be rebuilt, more centered on the complex, at 10 and under soccer field size, and next to that on the left are 2 basketball courts, and next to that is the new building that will have 7 classrooms in it with its own sequestered play yard. So we take a closer look then. You see at the center of the field. On the right we'll be repainting some of the 16th Street parking garage, the 2 basketball courts, the new building and its play yard. We can take a look then also at the floor plan. We have 4 kindergarten classrooms and 3 TK classrooms. Again, each has its own play yard sequestered from the older children on the site, but they will also, of course, have access to the central playground and playfield area. One aspect of the plan is that entire north side of the building will open up completely to the play yard, so there will be quite abundant northern light access to that play yard area. So this is a view of one of the kindergarten classrooms. To the left, you're looking out to their sequestered play area. And as you can see, there's one whole wall of glass there for natural light, but there's also light coming in from a skylight along the south side of the classroom. So a very strong principle of lighting a good quality educational classroom is to make sure there's light coming in from 2 different sides of the room. We're looking at the head wall here with a smart board on one side. On the other side will be another monitor with movable whiteboards, sink, built-in casework. We're now looking back out to the south towards the playground and field area. So there is view and light out to the play, but it is also protected from the activity of the central playground and playfield area. Now we're looking directly out north to the play yard area, and at the center of the glass wall will be vertically retracting doors which will allow kind of seamless relationship between the indoor and outdoor environments for the young students. And now we're in the play yard itself looking back at the classroom. And as you can see, whoops, what happened? What was I saying? Oh, as you can see, the building itself will provide quite a bit of the shade for the play yard. And then there are 20 or 24 trees actually in the play yard itself that will provide natural shade for the 4-year-olds and the 5-year-olds. So this is a view now with 16th Street in the lower left, the existing campus complex at the top of the image. You're seeing a portion of the field that will remain in place until that parking lot is able to be built. The playground area in the foreground and the new building. The building is designed as a kind of garden wall essentially. It's a very modest in scale. It's really meant to frame the open space and to protect the youngest children who are on campus in the best manner that we can accomplish. Here, 16th Street is on the right, jammed off the image to the far right, the field on the lower left, the existing school complex in the upper left, basketball courts in the new field, in the new building. Here we're now looking northeast with 16th Street at the top, the school complex at the bottom. You see the field to the right, the 2 basketball courts, and the new building. So we're using a kind of light sand color brick on the surfaces of the building, which will coordinate with the existing complex, but also achieve a kind of more substantial presence for this building, which will be the first new building built on campus in many, many years. So we're looking now directly north, the new building there, field to the right. Here, 16th Street is to the right. We're looking to the northwest. You see the playground, the basketball courts just beyond the field there. We are peering into the 2 TK classrooms, the 3 TK classrooms in the building itself. Here we're standing with our backs to 16th Street, looking at the historic core with the TK classrooms to the right, the new basketball courts ahead. So this is what the campus will look like at the completion of that. It's probably an 18 to 24 month construction process, so sometime in 2025 the new building and site work will be completed. This is a plan view of what the campus will look like at the completion of phase 1, and I'll go through with you what is envisioned to be the next 2 phases of redevelopment on campus. The second phase being essentially site redevelopment. So at this point, funding allowing, we'll have the opportunity to then tend to the north side of campus on the left and on the upper right reconfiguration of removal of the 16th Street parking lot. So what's in the plan is to create this parking lot that will connect 14th Street and 16th Street with a turnaround at the heart of it, so that the school has maximum flexibility in terms of how it choreographs pick up and drop off throughout the day, staff, visitor, and early ed parent parking. And when we build that, it does a variety of things. One is it provides a buffer between the campus and the neighbors to the north. As many of you who live on this campus know, there's an issue with noise and visual problems in that relationship. But it will also then liberate the site of the 16th Street parking lot for expanded playground area next to the field. This is what the campus will then look like at the conclusion of that site work, what we're calling phase 2. There are 2 other components of phase 2, which are once kindergarten has moved into the new building, vacating the 2 classrooms up front, we will be able to renovate those 2 classrooms for makerspace classrooms. They're ideally suited for it because they have plumbing and tons of space and high ceiling height, and the courtyard between them is ideal for outdoor makerspace classrooms. And then finally, the last component of this phase will be to transform the interstitial spaces between the linear classroom wings into really affirmatively designed outdoor classroom space, about half of which will be paid to accommodate tables and chairs for classroom activity. Half of it will be landscaped for stormwater management and for other kinds of outdoor play and learning opportunities. So these are the 2 renovation projects that will occur actually within the boundary of the existing classroom complex. No other work takes place within the existing classroom complex. The third phase will perhaps most dramatically transform the way certainly this room works, and that is to build the new cafeteria. Of the 3 campuses we're working with, this is the only one that does not have a separate cafeteria, and so it'll be a great opportunity to actually finally liberate this room for its purpose as an auditorium. And that will be built next to what you guys call the farm, the district calls the Learning Garden, up there near 16th Street. It will be completely modeled on the education specifications that emerged from the Education Master Plan in 2019. It's a pretty ambitious complex meant to house 400 students at once, along with faculty lounge and dining room, as well as classroom space for nutritional and cooking instruction. This is what the campus will look like at the conclusion of phases 2 and 3. The last phase is to build a new 2-story classroom building with 15 classrooms. 10 classrooms, bringing the total of new classrooms on the campus to 17. So this is the campus at conclusion of 2 and 3. This is the site of the final phase, phase 4, the new classroom building at 2-story format. And that completes the master plan some years down the road. So we've been emphasizing the relationship to the existing classroom complex, but also part of this is how the redevelopment will affect neighboring streets and residents. So we do have studied how that will work. Our goal has been really to have the minimal impact, visual impact certainly, on surrounding streets. So there are 4 views that will be included in the CEQA document, A, B, C, and D. A being standing on 16th Street, looking at the new building. As you can see, it's pretty much a garden wall, pretty low profile, and it's jams is to the left here. That's the fragment of the field that will be left at the conclusion of phase 1, where the new parking lot along the north side of campus will be accommodated. This, now you're walking a little bit down 16th Street. Their new building, early ed building, is the beige brick building on the far right. The field beyond 16th Street parking lot still in place. And then finally, when along 16th Street, the new multi-purpose facility, the cafeteria at the corner of Maple and 16th Street. We're now looking north. And then the last view is the opposite corner of campus. We're on 14th Street, the entrance to the new parking lot on the left, and the 2-story classroom building, and the place essentially where the portables are located now. So those are the 4 visual impact studies that were done on the neighborhood for the CEQA study. So that was a fire hose of information. I'll just take you through it one more time. This is the existing campus in its current configuration. Phase 1 is to build a new early education building, field, and playground areas. Phases 2 and 3 are to build a new parking lot, the new MPR, and the renovations within the existing classroom complex. And phase 4 is the new 10 classroom 2-story building at the north corner of the campus. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Actually, that part, did we even talk about the open space?
Only if the questions came out.
Okay, we'll save it in case it comes up.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Travis. I am the managing principal with Historic Resources Group in Pasadena. And we've been working with the team on this project, both in evaluating for the potential of having historic resources on campus, as well as speaking with the designers on how to protect those resources. So I'm just going to walk you through that very quickly right now and give you basically just a very quick overview of the development history of the property, its eligibility for historic listing, and what is significant about it. Our findings: we did find historic resources on campus, and that was a historic district. And then just take you quickly through our analysis of the master plan and its potential impacts on historical resources. Our conclusion being that we did not have significant impacts to historical resources. So just a really quick chronology. The property here where the school sits, was acquired by the district in the 1930s, but the campus itself wasn't actually built until 1948 when it opened, and in direct response to the post-World War II boom in population and the need for additional facilities for education. The initial campus was designed by an architect named Henry L. Gogarty. He was a very prolific architect, local architect here in Los Angeles, responsible in partnership with several quite nice commercial buildings in Hollywood, worked on the air terminal building at the Glendale Airport back in the 1920s, but in his own practice really focused largely on institutional properties, including many, many schools. And then almost immediately afterward, in the next 2 years, there was an additional expansion by Joe Estep, who also worked quite frequently here in Santa Monica, which just extended and added a few more classrooms to the building, largely in the existing plan that Gogarty had set up. And then in the 70s, we did have some alteration by a man named Robert Hyle Thomas. And since the 70s, there really hasn't been significant construction on the property. So like I said, population increase after World War II. There was a bond that was passed to fund new schooling, and within that very first year of opening, they had 672 students. So the demand was quite large at that time. In terms of its design, I know it probably seems fairly banal today, but it was quite innovative for its time. We call this sort of a cluster plan, but in the post-war era, started actually developing earlier than that here in Santa Monica. There was a rethinking about how schools should be constructed, and a sort of very imposing, monumental kind of civic structure, often 2 stories, that you used to see in the 19th century and the early 20th century. They sort of turned away from that and went to a very different plan that really emphasized a much less intimidating kind of architecture, single stories, and ample light, air, and immediate access to the outdoors. And in fact, this, which became ubiquitous largely throughout California, which is why you see a lot of these schools today. But this was something that really germinated right here in Santa Monica, and in the 1930s, and was actually referred to as the Santa Monica Plan of School Design. And again, kind of an international style school of architecture. The international style kind of derived from European modernism, and was sort of toyed with, and there were, here in the United States, but really took off after World War II here in the United States. And again, Herbert L. Gogarty, architect. So we were asked, part of our purview was to look at the campus, and we were asked to identify potential significance for the National Register of Historic Places, the California Register of Historic Resources, and for local listing here in Santa Monica. And we found that the school was significant under 2 criteria for all 3 listings, and they're parallel to each other. So criterion A under the National Register, 1 under the California Register, and 1 for local listing. They parallel each other. Criterion A11 is all about trends and patterns and events that might happen. And so we did find it eligible for educational institutional development here locally. And then criterion C, or 3, is all about architecture and design and building types. And so we also found it eligible under those criteria as well. And not just 1 building, not just 2 buildings, but a set of buildings. No individual building is individually significant on its own, but collectively they create a resource, and we call that a historic district. So we have several buildings, just as courtyards between them, the 14th Street Squad as kind of spaces that were defined by the buildings, and then some ancillary items, stone planter and the sign. So here's a kind of a map, and I know it's kind of hard to see, but you can see highlighted in green that original development of the campus. and that is what we're saying is eligible for listing as a historic district. And so here, I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with the school, but these are just those contributing elements. I should say that elements that contribute to the significance of the historic district are important contributors. And so here's just some of the things you'll see as you look around. So let me I'm just going to go through this because Jim did a very good job of taking me through all this. We identified the historic resource, and then the master plan was developed, and now we have to evaluate and see whether there will be impacts to that historic resource. And so there's several areas that we looked at. Under CEQA, an impact to a historical resource that is considered significant is one that results in material alteration or change that then threatens the eligibility of that resource. So it's not as if the resource can't change it. And so we feel like the district would retain sufficient integrity to convey its significance despite the demolition of these 4 buildings. There's also new construction that's happening. We're constructing new buildings throughout several phases. But again, we did not find any significant impacts from the new construction. They're all sufficiently distant from the historic district. They're quite compatible in terms of their design, in terms of their basic shapes. And they're also differentiated in terms of their materiality, in terms of some of their design features, so that you wouldn't confuse it. We're not mimicking historicity in some way to confuse a new building with an old building. They will be differentiated, and that's a key characteristic that we look for when we look for that kind of building within a historic property, and how you would what is compatible with a historic district. And then also we're doing some rehabilitation of some of the older buildings, and that will include some new openings, some new doorways, new garage kind of door style things, the ability to open up onto these new courtyards that are going to be constructed. But for the most part, we're using existing openings that already exist in the building. Very often, many of those openings already have had the windows and what's there currently changed out. In some cases, we are adding, I think, a few new openings and doing some things, but it's minor compared to the overall, across the entire set of buildings that we have. And so we feel that these alterations from rehabilitation will be compatible with the historic district and will not result in a significant impact. And so ultimately we did not find, although we are doing some alteration, there will be change on the campus, the district will still remain, it will still maintain sufficient integrity to convey its significance, and we've avoided significant impacts under CEQA because of those. And with that, I am done. So.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Nicole, and I'm an environmental planner with Ascent Environmental. We're the district's environmental consultant for evaluating the project's impacts relative to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA for short. So for this presentation, I'll be giving a brief overview of CEQA. I'll be providing a summary of the findings of the initial study that was prepared pursuant to CEQA, and then I'll provide a summary of how you as the public can participate in the CEQA process. Okay. So CEQA, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a law that requires public agencies to provide or to consider the environmental impacts of their projects before making decisions on those projects. Some of the main objectives of CEQA are to identify ways in which agencies can either eliminate or reduce environmental impacts of their projects, and to also allow the public and other public agencies to express their input. So when an agency is proposing a project, though some projects may be exempt from CEQA, but if a project isn't exempt from CEQA, an agency has to prepare an initial study to consider the environmental impacts of a project. A negative declaration can be adopted if the initial study finds that there are no adverse effects from a project. On the other hand, a mitigated negative declaration would be adopted if an agency finds that a project could result in potentially significant impacts, but those impacts could be reduced to less than significant levels with implementation of mitigation measures. And then the ND or MND is then circulated for public review, and a lead agency must consider public comments before adopting the ND or MND. When an MND is prepared, a mitigation monitoring and reporting program is prepared alongside, and that document is kind of an enforcing mechanism to ensure that the agency does in fact implement the mitigation measures that they are committing to. So I'll give a summary of the process so far. The district did prepare the initial study over the summer of 2022. The notice of intent is a document that signifies the start of a public review period, and that was published on November 14th. So the 30-day public review period will go through December 14th. So the meeting today is part of that public review period and is a chance for the public to provide comments on the initial study. Following the close of the public review period, the district will prepare a final initial study, and that is scheduled to happen in the December to January timeframe. And then in January, the District Board of Education will hold a meeting where they will decide whether or not to vote, or whether or not to approve the project based on the findings in the initial study. So now I'll provide a brief summary of the initial study findings. So essentially Appendix G of the state CEQA guidelines provides a list of 21 different resource topics where you would consider impacts on the environment. So the district's initial study covers all of these different topics. And the district made a no impact conclusion, meaning they found that the proposed project would not result in any changes in the environment with respect to the resource topics shown on the screen. And those topics are agriculture and forestry resources, mineral resources, population and housing, public services, recreation, and wildfire. And the district made a less than significant impact conclusion with respect to these resources shown on the screen, meaning that the project would result in impacts in these areas, but they wouldn't be substantial. And so those topics are aesthetics, air quality, energy, greenhouse gas emissions, hydrology and water quality, land use and planning, tribal cultural resources, and utilities and service systems. Now these topics shown on the screen, the district did make a less than significant with mitigation incorporated conclusion. So for these impacts, there are potentially significant impacts that would result, but all of these impacts can be reduced to less than significant levels with implementation of mitigation measures. So I'll go through each one of these individually and summarize the impacts of mitigation measures. So construction activities, and in particular vegetation and tree removal that would happen as part of the project, has potential to affect nesting birds if those construction activities occurred during the nesting bird season. So the district is committing to hiring a qualified biologist to conduct nesting bird surveys. If nesting birds are found, the district would, or the qualified biologist would establish a buffer around those nesting birds and prohibit construction activities until the birds are no longer dependent on the nests. Construction activities would also have potential to unearth archaeological resources. It's not anticipated just based on the amount of disturbance and development that has occurred on the campus, but the district will implement contingency measures in the event that a resource is found. So qualified archaeologists would be hired to assess the significance of any finds that are discovered by the contractor. And the archaeologists would recommend the proper treatment of those resources. If the resources end up being of Native American origin, the appropriate Native American tribe would be contacted, and a summary of all the findings would be presented in a final report. Similar for paleontological resources, ground disturbing activities do have unlikely potential to uncover fossils and other specimens. So the district would retain a paleontological monitor to monitor any excavations that extend 5 feet or below the ground surface. And similarly, the monitor would be responsible for cataloging and the proper treatment and disposition of those resources, and summarizing the findings in a report. So based on the age of the structures on campus, there is potential for hazardous building materials to be present. Those materials may include asbestos, lead-based paint, polychlorinated biphenyls, and organochlorine pesticides, which are used in termite treatments. So the district is committing to doing site-specific testing of all buildings that will be demolished and renovated to ensure that there's no hazardous levels of these materials. And if there are, the district would remove, or the contractor would remove those materials and dispose of them in accordance with all the applicable regulations. And similarly, if contaminated soils are found, the same thing would happen. So as part of the project design, there will be a new driveway along 16th Street at the same location of an existing crosswalk. So the district is proposing to relocate that existing crosswalk in coordination with the City of Santa Monica to ensure pedestrian safety and the safety of the campus community. Construction activities would also result in temporary increases in noise levels around the surrounding neighborhoods. So the district is committing to implementing various noise control methods. These methods may include the installation of temporary noise curtains or the use of engine mufflers and things of that nature to make sure that noise levels don't cause human disturbance or health impacts. The project would also involve the installation of HVAC units on the roofs of new buildings, and these units have potential to result in permanent increases in noise levels. However, the district would conduct noise testing to ensure that the increases in noise levels do not exceed the City of Santa Monica's municipal code noise standards. And similarly, construction activities also have potential to increase temporary vibration levels in the area. There's a typo there is left off, but essentially the district will prepare a vibration control plan, which would include various vibration control methods to ensure that the surrounding neighborhood isn't adversely affected. And the last impact I'll talk about is related to transportation. So the presence of construction equipment and vehicles in and around the campus does present a safety hazard for the campus community. So the district is going to prepare a construction management plan, which would also include a temporary traffic control plan to prevent any safety hazards associated with construction. So now I'll talk a little bit about how the public can provide input on the project. So as I mentioned before, the public review period is ongoing. It's started on November 14th and will end on December 14th. The full text of the initial study that I've summarized here is available at the QR code or the link on the screen. And then hard copies are also available on the campus in the main office as well as at the district's office. So the district would like to solicit any public comments on the initial study. There are multiple ways that you can provide comments. You can either do so here at the meeting. You may have picked up a comment card when you came in, or you can also come up and speak after this presentation. If you'd like a little more time to think about it, you can also send comments by email or by mail to Kerry Upton, and his contact information is up on the screen. Just remember that comments are all due by 5 p.m. on December 14th. And so with that, we can start the public comment period. And a few things to note. I don't know if we'll run out of time, but if so, we'll try to limit to 3 minutes per person at the beginning, and then if there's more time at the end, you can come back and provide additional comments. But we ask that you please provide your name and identify the environmental issue area that you wish to comment on. And just to note that the intent of this meeting is to collect public comments, and the district will be providing written responses to those comments in the final initial study. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. And thank you very much, Jim and Paul. We appreciate it. Again, there's not a whole lot of you here, so if you do have comments that you want to make tonight, we'll record them. As Nicole was saying, that part isn't really like a back and forth. This is to solicit your comments, and the district will respond in writing as part of the response to the written comments that we receive. After this, if you don't have any comments, or after your comments on the CEQA document, then we can also just answer questions if you have any about the upcoming projects or the CEQA process or whatever. So we don't typically get a lot of comments on the CEQA document during these meetings, but certainly we welcome them if anybody has anything to add or to comment, I should say. It's a lively group. There you go.
So I have one, Ben Cracky.
They can hear you, Ben. Go ahead.
All right, I have a kindergartner and a second grader here. In addition to some of the concerns for CEQA, are there other sustainability measures being baked into the new buildings that would benefit the environment as opposed to just basically around parking?
Sure. Jim's probably best to answer that. I mean, it doesn't sound like it was actually, you don't have a comment on the CEQA document, obviously. That's a legit question on the projects we have. Before we do that, and I think that's a great one, are there any comments on the CEQA documents, or can we just go straight into questions? All right, Jim, do you want to address the sustainability of the projects? Thank you.
So as you may or may not know, California building codes are pretty much at the level, almost gold level LEED certification. So even just to get a building permit through the DSA, we're making quite a bit of progress on that front. I guess I'll just answer with some general comments. One is just the orientation of the buildings. So they are actually replicating. It's one of the most positive things about the original complex is that all the wings are facing north and south, which is ideal for daylighting and also for heat load. So we're doing the same thing with the two new buildings along the north side of campus. So for example, the early ed building's getting most of its daylight from the north side of the classroom, right? Second thing is just reduction of energy consumption. These buildings have very little insulation, and as I stated, new building codes require quite a bit more insulation, so the energy production or consumption that occurs in the new buildings will be significantly lower than the existing buildings. And the third is reduction of heat island effect. Santa Monica is kind of paved over. That's why we had to put air conditioning in this building, because it's the heat island effect that's warming the local climate. So we're using trees for natural kinds of shading to reduce heat island effect, and as much natural turf as we can to cut down the reflection. Black asphalt being one of the worst perpetrators of heat island effect. Those are probably the three main things I would suggest on that front.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, any other questions? Any, yes?
I have a question. Do I have to give my name? I'm Nikki Gordon. I have a question about the proposal at JAMS, which I don't know anything about, but in
Okay.
terms of construction, would there be overlapping construction with
So-
the two?
So the planned project at JAMS is a little renovation of the library. That's what the one you're talking about, not anything big in the future, correct?
Yeah, whatever they're having their meeting on.
Sure. So, well, their meeting will, when is that meeting?
Next Monday.
Monday? It will go more than this, but as far as the construction that we're talking about for phase one, you know, Jim talked about the new building and the field and everything. We do think that the library renovation project at JAMS will be done at the same time. Might be done by the same contractor just for efficiency from our side of it. But it's not as big of a project, of course. So, but yeah, we do think that that will happen at the same time. I don't think the two projects will really impact each other much, but you know, obviously we're focused on the master plan now as well as designing for phase one construction. But you know, we haven't started designing future phases, and we won't until the appropriate time. One of the factors that goes into that is funding. So, you know, we have the funding now to do a certain number of projects, and our anticipation is that this project at Rogers and the one that you just referenced at JAMS will be part of that. But future phases and work at a lot of other campuses depends on getting suitable funding for that, which would mean future bond measures. So that's a factor as to when we could do it. We don't really want to have, it's very impactful for a campus to be under construction for 10 years straight, right? So we tend to try to space these out. So we may do this project here, we may do one at McKinley at the same time, and then maybe one or two others. We'll be doing Mirror Smash, which you may have heard is it's a different issue, but got to be done. And then we'll stagger a little bit and start the next round of projects, which, you know, it may include McKinley instead of this first cycle. It may include Grant and Franklin. And then typically at some of our campuses we'll have a gap between one project and the start of the next. Again, a lot of that is a workload issue. You don't want to have every campus under construction all the time. I would say most of these are probably 10 to 15 year cycles, master plan cycles, but it's going to vary by campus, and there are variations within, sorry, I forgot I was wearing this. There are variations within each individual campus's program that'll change that, but generally I would say done in somewhere around 10 plus years. Yes?
So I've been a staff member here for 22 years. I'm just curious why we're starting, and I'm guessing it's because they want everybody out of the portable building, but why we're starting with the TK kindergarten building when we haven't had a great, we've been promised over many years, we've done this process many times, a new auditorium.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious why we started with that, plus ours is the most outdated kitchen.
Sure. Well, and I think there are other campuses that have cafeteria and a auditorium, right? And we know that that's a priority here. It is a district-wide priority to get rid of portables, and so that does influence all of the decisions that were made. Now, on each campus, and Jim, you might be better to answer specifically here, but real quick, on each campus, when we do our master planning, we're looking at the phasing. We also have to kind of look at a way to build the projects that make sense, right? So sometimes we would say, well, the easiest thing to do would be to tear down that building and build a new one there. We got to put those kids somewhere for the 2 years during construction. So in many cases there are, and that's just an example of one of the outside factors, that something may not seem like the highest priority, but it's being done first. On this campus, I wasn't actually involved in that decision making. Jim, would you want to address why early education first?
Yeah, so it is the priority of the Board of Education to get kids out of portable classrooms and into permanent classrooms. And by getting pre-K and some of K out of the portables and into a new building, we're liberating both that area of campus, but also the 2 kindergarten classrooms for makerspace, which is a high priority here to actually to refine or to expand upon your makerspace program, which I understand is one of the most successful in the district at the elementary school level. After phase one, and maybe I wasn't clear on this, there are any number of ways that you can phase implementation. So it could be that the MPR comes immediately thereafter, if that ends up being expressed as the highest priority. You don't have to go through it in the way that I described it. I just had to do it that way because you have to tell a story and how it would be. So that is a decision that can be made anytime in the future.
Nobody minds, I have one more question.
Sure.
So, as somebody who will be coming here for the next 5 to 7 years, while you do this, where are you gonna put all the construction materials?
Yeah, well, that's the nice thing about offsetting the building from the north property line, because that piece of half of the field there would be basically isolated from the rest of the campus. So that's where all the construction, staging, and parking will take place. So that's a kind of happy unfolding of events.
Better here than on many of the campuses we have. I mean, it's always tough. Contractors need space to lay down the material. They've got to have the trailers out there. This campus, as Jim said, we're fortunate that we have that setback, and that's a pretty sizable space for a construction laydown yard. So it won't be as impactful as some campuses will have.
Well, except the playground's gonna be quite a bit smaller.
That's clearly going to be an impact. But I think the first part of phase one is to construct the field, correct? So we will still have field space, but you're losing space. I'm not discounting what you're saying.
But it's temporary, because when the portables are gone on both sides, then the playground will expand.
But there is that temporary squeeze while we're building.
Right.
And again, I hate to say this, it's the same thing happens if you're renovating your house. Well, you can't use the kitchen for 6 months. That
I
sucks.
know, but we just increased by 150 kids,
I
so
know. It is an
obviously
impact.
those of us that are here every day are starting to think about, how's that look?
Well, it's gonna, it's gonna be, any construction project is tough. I won't lie and say, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. Any construction project is tough to live through. We'll work to reduce that as much as possible. And some of those things are, let's keep contractors far away from the main part of campus as we can. Let's open up what we can when we can. And then let's all just gut it out.
I think the goal to do that playground slot over like the summer, spring, so that you don't have any downtime during the actual school year.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yep.
So I'm gonna add on to that, because I've seen the district do this before. You're not gonna come in over spring break and start breaking things down.
On this project, no. There are times where we do that to try to get ahead and be able to, for example, finish a project during the summer. On this project, I don't think we have the ability to do that, frankly. We won't be hiring the contractor until first Kevin.
Well, you probably won't, not until you get approval, so that makes sense.
Well, we'll hire the contractor sometimes before we get DSA approval, but they certainly can't start working until then.
We'd like to start in March with our contractor. And they'll be on the team for several months while the design is being completed and we're planning.
But Kevin, we don't have any preliminary demolition that we're planning on this campus, correct?
No, the first plan will be to attack the field, get the field ready as soon as possible.
But it's
I'm not sure yet if it's entirely a summer project. It is a lot of work to convert the asphalt into a play field. Like more than it just seems. Just cutting a hole. But that's the idea. It's as much of it done during the summer so that it can be reduced impact on the kids eating Christmas.
What else do we have?
How far along in the design of your early education building? Where are you guys at in that process?
We're submitting to the regulatory agency on the 14th.
I have a question about that too. Sorry. Okay, I'm your average teacher. I'm 5'3". I'm a little older, I'm 55, but most of us are in the late 40s. Women, we cannot currently open our windows, so I just want to make sure that these garage doors that are going to be happening can actually be moved by a 5'3" woman.
Yeah, they will be automated. Those
Oh,
doors.
okay.
You're not going to have to do this.
And, okay, so they're automated, so is there, I'm gonna go with what happens when the automation doesn't work.
Right. You go through the
I'm
door.
one of those people, sorry, because I've been living it for 22 years in
Yeah.
this building and seeing things that happen, so there's gonna be, it's gonna be electric, like an
Yeah.
electric garage door.
Mhm.
And then if it doesn't work, it just doesn't go up when you have doors.
You
that-
call up Carrie.
Right, it's not your own way. But one thing that I will say is that our M&O department is going to become very familiar with these, because this isn't the only campus we're doing that at, of course.
Right.
In fact, we've implemented it already at Samuel High in the cafeteria in the new Discovery building. We'll be putting it in the new Exploration building, and many of our elementary campuses will have it as well. In fact, I think the JAMS library project will open. I don't know that it'll be the same.
Still, you know,
Similar.
I'm not sure what the
I'm not, yeah, and I don't know if we even know who that is yet either, but they're gonna get very familiar with these. Now, hopefully, if I had some wood around, I would knock on it, but hopefully we won't be having to repair these a lot, but our M&O department will. It's not gonna be a one-off thing where they're gonna go, gosh, I don't know, let's just put a piece of caution tape on it and leave it. And yeah, I think if it happens, we'll have to go through the regular work order process. But we're not putting in the, cheap, rinky-dink type of doors either, so they should be pretty high quality. Hopefully it'll last.
I couldn't quite tell in the design, so there is the garage door thing that opens, but there are actual glass doors that open out
Yes.
too, so if that stops functioning, you still have access
You'll
to
always
the
be able to
outside.
get out.
Yeah. And there are no operable windows, because it's air conditioned, so. I mean, you'd be able to open the doors if you wanted just to let in some fresh air, but otherwise, it's AC.
do you have a process or an opportunity to comment on the design of that building?
For phase one?
The early education building.
Yeah, we're ready to submit its design.
Okay, I figured.
So there was a process, but as we go into our future projects, there will again be a process and certainly opportunity for parents and community members to participate and contribute.
Yeah, we always enjoy that actually. I mean, with the design review committees, it always, sometimes it's painful, but it does improve the building, for sure.
I heard there might be a vote on whether or not we have grass or turf.
Well, there's our elementary schools in Santa Monica in particular get a lot of heavy use on the fields because, as you are aware, in Santa Monica, those are a big portion of our parks. They're used, of course, for soccer on weekends as well. So grass fields tend to become mud fields, which I'm sure you guys have experienced. And so what we've done is, we haven't yet done this, I think, at any elementary, but like in our middle schools, JAMS, of course, has been.
Yeah.
But a couple years ago, we did the Lincoln Field, and we replaced it with an artificial turf field. And of course, it holds up a lot better, so there's a lot more hours of use, but it's not natural grass. And, there's something to be said about that. So I don't think we've made the decision, a firm decision on any of these, but it is something that we're considering, and, we're gonna have to make that decision pretty quick.
And that's to go for the kindergarten yard as well.
No, that would be natural grass.
So this would only be the U10 soccer field. Well, the play field that happens to
Right.
also be U10 soccer.
Sorry.
It's okay, usually if one person has a question, other people have it, and they're just not asking, so. Anything else before we wrap up? Okay. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to moving these projects forward.